Today I'm going over the section in chapter 3 called Beyond Perception. I have said that the abilities you possess are only shadows of your real strength, and that perception, which is inherently judgmental, was introduced only after the separation. No one has been sure of anything since. So Jesus is explaining to us how incredibly confused we are. As soon as we thought we separated from God and from one another and began perceiving, which means judging, we've been confused about everything and we haven't been sure of anything since, is what Jesus is telling us here. I have also made it clear that the resurrection was the means for the return to knowledge, which was accomplished by the union of my will with the Father's. All right, so what he's telling us is that once Jesus understood who he really was and that he was one with his Father, otherwise known as God or Source, he is in complete union with his Source. That is when he returned to knowledge. And that is what the resurrection is a message of. We can now establish a distinction that will clarify some of our subsequent statements. All right, next paragraph says, since the separation, the words create and make have become confused. Okay, so this next paragraph is going to explain the difference between making, which happens in the illusory world of perception and judgment, and creation, which happens with the will of God when we are home with Source. That is when we truly create. When you make something, you do so out of specific sense of lack or need. So that's why making is done within the illusory world, because it's coming from a sense of lack. Anything made for a specific purpose has no true generalizability. When you make something to fill a perceived lack, you are tacitly implying that you believe in separation. The ego has invented many ingenious thought systems for this purpose. None of them is creative. Inventiveness is wasted effort, even in its most ingenious form. The highly specific nature of invention is not worthy of the abstract creativity of God's creations. All right. So if you are an inventor, okay, in this world of form, or you know anyone who is an inventor, or you admire inventions and inventors, this is not a judgment against that. Jesus is never judging us, okay? But he's using that as an example to say that no matter how ingenious the invention is, it's still not creation. He's saying it's wasted effort, wasted time, because it's just making things within this world that assumes that there's a lack and there's a need, and this ingenious invention is going to fill that lack and need, and that somehow everything's going to be okay after that. But of course, it never is in this world of duality, right? We just need to keep inventing more and more things all the time to keep perceiving that our lack is being fulfilled. That's why he's using that as an example to say that we're not actually creating anything within this world. The only way that we can truly create is when we know that we are one with God, just like Jesus knew when he was here over 2,000 years ago. When we know that we are one with our Creator, with our Source, and we are following our intuition, our internal spiritual guide, then we can practice making things in this world with the Holy Spirit, which is getting us ready all the time to go home, to go to knowledge, to know that this world isn't even here and that we don't need to keep making things in this world. What we truly desire to do is to create. And we only do that by knowing that we are one with God. And it has nothing to do with this world. I know that that's very confusing for most people because most people perceive that they're actually here and want to believe that their life is meaningful and that they can actually do things within the world that are important, that are meaningful, that are loving, because we all have an internal desire to give and to create. So what this book is describing and explaining to us is that that is not possible in this world. It is only possible to truly create with God. And we are one with God. Next paragraph says, knowing as we have already observed does not lead to doing. Because when we know, that is when we are in knowledge and we are permanently awakened. There is no doing in that world. We only think that we're doing things when we are here in the illusion. The confusion between your real creation and what you have made of yourself is so profound that it has become literally impossible for you to know anything. All right, that's why you will hear course students saying sometimes, I know nothing, because that is what Jesus is constantly telling us, is that as long as we think that we are in this world, that we are these bodies, that we are these separate identities, we know nothing. We are incredibly confused. That is what Jesus is telling us here. Knowledge is always stable, and it is quite evident that you are not. Oh, Jesus, he's so funny, right? We're not stable here in this world. We have no idea who we are. We're confused all the time. We're feeling pain. We're feeling separation. We're feeling lack. This is all confusion because none of it's real. It's not who we really are. So this is why we know nothing and why we are so confused. All right, so he's reminding us that knowledge is stable, knowledge is truth, knowledge is the oneness with one another and with God. This is where we create, that's our true home, where we really are right now. We've never left. Nevertheless, you are perfectly stable as God created you. So in our truth of who and what we really are, we are perfectly stable. In this sense, when your behavior is unstable, you are disagreeing with God's idea of your creation. All right, so every time we believe we're here and that we believe in lack, we believe in this world of duality, we are unstable every time. And when we believe those things, we are disagreeing with God. That's what the entire course is about. It's about removing the obstacles to God's love, because God, or source creation, is our truth. That is our true home. It's where we already are. We just forgot. So the more that we allow Christ consciousness, Jesus, Spirit, Holy Spirit, God, source creation, whatever you want to call it, as long as you are letting that take over your mind, you will become more and more stable, because you will start to wake up to the truth of who you really are. And when we are fully awakened and we are in knowledge, we are completely stable. It is completely consistent. He says you can do this if you choose, meaning disagreeing with God, but you would hardly want to do it if you were in your right mind. He's always reminding us how insane we are and how our choices are making us miserable. That is why we are insane, right? What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. That's what we're all doing here. It's why we're all insane. The fundamental question you continuously ask yourself cannot properly be directed to yourself at all. You keep asking what it is you are. This implies that the answer is not only one you know, but is also one that is up to you to supply. All right, that's where we go wrong. This is why we're always trying to be the boss, why we even ended up here in this illusory world to begin with, because we wanted to know what it would be like to be the boss, to be in charge. So again, we are mistaken because we think that we have to supply the answer to ourselves of who and what we really are. He says, yet you cannot perceive yourself correctly. You have no image to be perceived. The word, and he puts in quotes, image, is always perception related and not a part of knowledge. Okay? So as long as we think we're here in this world, we are using perception, and we want to have images of things in our mind to be able to perceive. And we keep trying to have an image of God. We keep trying to have an image of Spirit. And as long as we're doing that, we're constantly barking up the wrong tree. We're going to be confused. We're not going to find it there. Images are symbolic and stand for something else. Okay? Everything in this world is symbolic. There is nothing here that is real. Every single image that we perceive is symbolic of something else. The idea of changing your image recognizes the power of perception. but also implies that there is nothing stable to know, right? Because there is nothing stable to know within the world of perception, within this world of illusion where we think we are. There's nothing stable here. Knowing is not open to interpretation. You may try to interpret meaning, but this is always open to error because it refers to the perception of meaning. Such incongruities are the result of attempts to regard yourself as separated and unseparated at the same time. All right, so as long as we're trying to know that we are spirit, know that we are one with one another and with God, yet at the same time are trying to be these separate individual selves, we're confused. It is impossible to make so fundamental confusion without increasing your overall confusion still further. So he's just telling us how we are just constantly confusing ourselves further and further and further as we continue to try to make this world work. We're trying to make our illusions real. We're trying to convince ourselves and everyone else that we are a separate individual being that has something important to contribute to this world. But this book is telling us no, it's not even here. The only thing that's important or meaningful is knowing that we are one with one another and one with God, and that we are just love extending eternally. That's it. Your mind may have become very ingenious, but as always happens when method and content are separated. It is utilized in a futile attempt to escape from the inescapable impasse. Ingenuity is totally divorced from knowledge because knowledge does not require ingenuity. Ingenious thinking is not the truth that shall set you free. But you are free of the need to engage in it when you are willing to let it go. More fancy words to say that as long as we think that we are separate beings, that there's any kind of lack, that we need to come up with ingenious ideas of how to fill that lack, that we are mistaken. We are perceiving incorrectly. And he's telling us that the correct thing to do is to let it go, to let that perception of separation go. Prayer is a way of asking for something. It is the medium of miracles. But the only meaningful prayer is for forgiveness. Okay? As we wander around in this life as a course student, trying to figure out how to not be an ego and have misperception, and we're asking ourselves as things keep appearing to happen to us, what is this for? What is this for? The only answer ever is forgiveness. That's what everything is for forgiving. And what does that mean? Not the world's definition of forgiveness, but the Course's definition of forgiveness means knowing that nothing's really here, knowing the truth of who and what we really are, which is one with one another, one with God, extending love eternally. We are just love, love being. That's it. But the only meaningful prayer is for forgiveness because those who have been forgiven have everything. Meaning, once we practice forgiveness and know the truth, we have everything. There is no lack. Once forgiveness has been accepted, prayer in the usual sense becomes utterly meaningless. Okay? Praying for parking spaces, praying for health issues, praying for money, praying for any of the things that people will typically pray for in this world, he's telling us is meaningless. The only thing that we ever want to pray for, truly inside ourselves, what we truly want is to know who we really are, is to go home to God. Because inside we have a voice that is constantly whispering to us. That's Holy Spirit, or what this book calls Holy Spirit. You can call it anything you want. But it is the voice for God within this illusory dream that is constantly calling us home. We hear it. We desire it. That's why we're even drawn to this course to begin with. We're following that voice, that tether, that message home. So he's telling us not to waste our time praying for specific things within the world, that this is meaningless. What we want to pray for is to perceive differently, to perceive correctly, to forgive. The prayer for forgiveness is nothing more than a request that you may be able to recognize what you already have. All right, knowing who and what we really are, that we're really home with God in heaven, which is just a state of oneness, of beingness, of love right now. That's where we are right now. We've never left there. We've always been there. We just mistakenly think that we are separated in this world of illusion. In electing perception instead of knowledge, you placed yourself in a position where you could resemble your Father only by perceiving miraculously. So when we're trapped in this illusory world and we believe that we're separate and we are using perception, we have replaced knowledge when we're doing that. And we put ourselves in a position where we think that God is outside of us and something miraculous. Okay? But that's not the truth. The truth is that we are one with God and that God is not outside of us and any more miraculous than we are. You have lost the knowledge that you yourself are a miracle of God. Okay, that's what I just said. We are one with God. We are a miracle just like God is. We are the same. Creation is your source and your only real function. That's it. There's nothing else that's real other than that. Being one with source and extending love eternally. The statement, God created man in his own image and likeness, needs reinterpretation. Okay, once again, Jesus is going to use quotes from the Bible and then he's going to redefine it for us. Image can be understood as thought and likeness as of a like quality. God did create spirit in his own thought and of a quality like to his own. There is nothing else. Perception, on the other hand, is impossible without a belief in more and less. All right? Because as soon as we are perceiving lack, and we think that there is more and less of things. At every level, it involves selectivity. Perception is a continual process of accepting and rejecting, organizing and reorganizing, shifting and changing. Evaluation is an essential part of perception because judgments are necessary in order to select. All right, so he's just giving more details about what happens when we're perceiving and all the judging that's happening while we're doing it. He's pointing out to us all the things that exist within the world of perception, within the world of illusion, so that we can start to catch on. What happens to perceptions if there are no judgments and nothing but perfect equality? Perception becomes impossible, he tells us. Truth can only be known. All of it is equally true, and knowing any part of it is to know all of it. Because when we are in knowledge, we know all of it. We are complete. It is stable and complete. Only perception involves partial awareness. Okay? Only when we are in the world of illusion do we have partial awareness. Knowledge transcends the laws governing perception because partial knowledge is impossible. It's not possible to only know truth a little bit. You either completely know it or you don't. It is all one and has no separate parts. You who are really one with it need but know yourself, and your knowledge is complete. To know God's miracle is to know him. More beautiful, fancy words to tell us that we are one with God. We are the same as God. And when we know what God or source creation really is, that's when we know who we really are. Forgiveness is the healing of the perception of separation. All right? Separation's not real. It's pretend. It's a part of the world of illusion. So as we're practicing forgiveness, we are healing the false perception of separation. Correct perception of your brother is necessary because minds have chosen to see themselves as separate. That's what practicing forgiveness is. When we can see everyone else as being the same as us and the same as God, that's practicing forgiveness. And that is how we start to heal our mistaken perception of separation. That is its miraculous power. The fact that each one has this power completely is a condition entirely alien to the world's thinking, because the world thinks in terms of lack and separation. The world believes that if anyone has everything, there's nothing left, right? That's a belief in lack. But God's miracles are as total as his thoughts because they are his thoughts. All right. God's thought is that beingness, is the eternal extension of love. As long as perception lasts, prayer has a place. Since perception rests on lack, those who perceive have not totally accepted the atonement and given themselves over to truth. Perception is based on a separated state, so that anyone who perceives at all needs healing. Okay, as soon as we're perceiving, we know that we are mistaken and we are in the world of lack, and we just need to perceive again. We need to practice forgiveness, to overlook the world of form, to use our spiritual sight to see truly, to see with correct perception, which helps eventually, as we keep perceiving correct perception again and again and again and again, eventually we will know it. Communion, not prayer, is the natural state of those who know. Okay, because prayer is asking. We need prayer when we think that we are separate, when we think we are lacking something and we need to ask God for something. But when we perceive correctly, we know that we are whole. We know that we lack nothing. That is practicing forgiveness. That is the miracle when we perceive correctly. And communion, meaning knowing that you are one with God, being one with God, experiencing that eternal extension of love. And that is the totality of who you are. That is being in communion with God. And when you're there, you are in knowledge. And you know that you and God are inseparable. How beautiful indeed are the thoughts of God who live in his light. It is beautiful. And this is what Jesus is reminding us of. That is our true home. That is our true state of being. Your worth is beyond perception because it is beyond doubt. You do not perceive yourself in different lights. Know yourself in the one light where the miracle, that is you, is perfectly clear. So when we know the truth of who we are and we know that we are one with God, we are perfectly clear. We have knowledge. So just remember to be gentle with yourself. It is not something that we can force. It is not something that we can do. It is not something that requires any kind of effort in doing. It's all about allowing, about releasing the ego's grip that it has on our mind and allowing our own Christ consciousness to come in and start to tell us the truth. That's what Holy Spirit is. It's that voice for God within our illusory world. So the more that we release and let go and allow that voice to become louder and louder and to perceive correctly again and again and again, we are doing the work of a miracle worker, which is to allow the Christ consciousness part of our mind to choose the correct perception until one day we no longer need perception because we will be in knowledge.